I want you to think of a time when you were at your professional best, when you were just in your zone, when you were doing work that would have been harder to not do than to do. The work felt so natural to you, and maybe it was difficult, but you were just in your zone. In fact, you maybe found yourself kind of looking around going, you could do this too if you just focused. Look, here's how I do it, because it's just something you can do so naturally. And other people come to you for that thing. And you're thinking, this isn't that hard. But to them, it's masterful, because that is when you're in your zone. So think about specific examples of time when you're in that zone. Think of who you were working with or for. What were the circumstances? Were you leading a team or were you part of a team? Were you on a team at all or were you working solo? Were you creating something new from scratch or were you executing on something that was proven? Think of all those different elements. Now I want you to think about, how did you feel? In fact, how do you feel now just even thinking about that? I want you to think about, what were your thoughts? How did your head feel? How about your jaw and your neck and your back and your heart, your hands? Were you feeling energized? What was your energy level? For me, I'm at my best when I'm helping individuals or team be at their best. I can't help myself. It doesn't matter if it's with a client or a friend or a member of the family. When they start talking about, I'm really frustrated, I don't know what to do, it takes everything in me not to go into my zone. It just comes naturally. So now I want you to pause for a second and go to the other side. I want you to think about times when you really struggle. When you're doing something that no matter how many classes you've taken, how hard you try, how much you try to do it like somebody else, it's just hard. And you start to second guess yourself on everything. You may find yourself saying, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do this? I need to hire a coach. I need someone to fix me. So think about those examples, those specific examples. Again, what were the circumstances? Who were you working with or for? Were you part of a team or were you solo? Were you leading a team or you were part of that team? Were you creating something from scratch and didn't even know where to start? Or were you executing on a plan over and over and over again and you just couldn't do it anymore? And I want you to think about how you felt during those times. And how do you feel thinking about those times again? How does your brain feel? What's your thought process? How does your head feel, and your neck, and your jaw, and your shoulders, and your heart? What's your energy level like? For me, being in that place is when I'm doing all the administrative things that I have to do as just part of my business. And yes, I can hire others to do it. And yes, I can outsource it, but there's still a few things that I have to do myself. And I'm actually fairly good at it. That's what my accountant has told me. But I'm not great. I'm not masterful. If I can do it in short periods of time, I can be okay. But if I spend too much time doing that work, I can't get off the couch at night. I lose all my energy. My brain gets a little bit in a fog. Because when we spend time in our area of strength, it makes us stronger. It makes us feel like we can move mountains. It feels just so natural. It would be harder to not do that thing than to actually do it. But when we spend time in our areas of weakness, it makes us physically, mentally, and emotionally weak. I was working with a client, Kim, and I asked her the first question I always ask someone who comes to me for coaching. I said, Kim, tell me a time when you were at your best. And Kim thought, and she was looking down like she was trying to find something to pick up. And she finally looked up and she said, I'm sure at some point I enjoyed what I was doing, but I can't remember when or what I was doing or who it was with. And so we really started to dig into the strengths and weaknesses and how do you spend more time in your strengths. And the more I talked, the more she looked at me like, I don't get it. And I happened to be holding a rubber band. And I said, Kim, I want you to think of your career like this rubber band. Yeah, she gave me that same look, like, now I think you're just crazy. And I said, just bear with me on this. But if you have a rubber band and it never gets used, for a couple days it's probably okay. But if it doesn't get used for weeks or months, potentially years, what happens to that rubber band? And she said, well, it gets brittle and it'll break. Right. You try to use that little rubber band and it snaps and it's lost its purpose. It's such a sad little rubber band. But conversely, if I take this rubber band and I stretch it, now if I stretch it for a little bit, I mean, that's its purpose, right? But what if I do this really far for a really long time? What will happen? And Kim responded, well, of course, it's going to snap. It's going to break. I said, right. And who gets hurt? And she said, well, I would. And I said, and who else? She said, well, everybody around me. And it was at that moment that you could see the light bulb went off. Because when we manage our life and we manage our careers like a rubber band, we become very mindful and purposeful in our activities. And we understand that there are times when we need to rest, but don't stay there too long because you'll get brittle and break and lose all the amazingness about you. But also, if you buy way too far into the no pain, no gain, and growth happens outside the comfort zone, which is true, but listen to yourself and your body and your mind to say, I've been hanging out here too long and something's gonna snap. And so now you're mindful and purposeful in coming back to center to rest. And when you start to think about this and you start to manage this yourself and you don't let others manage all of that for you and impose their values and their strengths onto you, but you're doing it yourself, you become like a happy little rubber band, right? You become mindful on when to stretch and when to come back to center, to the point where it almost becomes automatic. I have learned to alternate between working with clients and teams, getting this message out, and spending time on the administrative things that allow me to do the thing I love. But if I get off balance, bad things happen. This is where you find joy. Job joy, life joy, career joy, whatever you want to call it, this is where you find joy. And when you're in that space of joy, you are much more outward. When you're in that struggle, we tend to become inward. We tend to be thinking, how do I get through the day? And you get into survival mode. But when you're in that space of joy, you'll find yourself standing taller. You'll find yourself being more confident, and you'll find yourself being more outward. And when you're in that space, people will describe you as, look at that leader. They're able to serve not only themselves, but their community. In fact, they'll say it so often, it'll show up in nominations for awards. In fact, the word community was listed 34 times for 13 people. And words like leadership and serve and member of community, all of those showed up over 100 times. So on behalf of our community, your community, I want to thank and congratulate our HER honorees, Abby, Ann, and Casey, Deb, Deneen, Jen, Jennifer, and Julie, and Kathy, and Lanisha, and Maria, Rachel, and Sophia. Thank you for sharing your talents and for making this world a better place.